All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining. Again, my name is John LeBaron. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Pattern, and we are very excited to bring to you this webinar today, how to enact a third-party seller strategy on e-commerce marketplaces. We are very excited to be able to have a couple of special guests. If you're not familiar with Pattern or have not seen one of our webinars in the past, we are one of the leading marketplace accelerators globally. We have 18 global locations, and we're shipping, close to $500,000 units a week. And we are one of Amazon's largest sellers. We also operate on Walmart.com, on Target.com, on eBay, as well as a host of international marketplaces, including Tmall, Taobao, Rakuten, Coupang, and Zalando, and a handful of other ones as well. So we are excited to be joined today by Darren Garcia at Voorhees eControl, as well as Nancy Eichler from Megafood. So I will turn it over and let them introduce themselves a little bit. We are also joined today by one of our VPs of sales, Steve Ellis. So Steve, why don't I actually just start with you, give a little bit of background, how long you've been a Pattern, a little bit of your background in the industry and what you think you'll be bringing to this. And then we'll turn it over to Darren. And last but not least, we'll bring it over to Nancy. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, John, and thanks for having me. My name's Steve Ellis. I've been at Pattern now for 4 years, and been involved in the sales and recruitment process of most of the wonderful brands that we have in our portfolio here. Spent most of my career, almost all of my career actually, in the data and software space. Prior to Pattern, I worked at the world's largest database company, Oracle Corporation, helping organizations manage risk, find efficiencies, and grow revenue through the use of software tools, algorithms, and ultimately the data that they have available to them.
Excellent. Darren.
Yeah, hey everybody, Darren Garcia, partner at Voorhees eControl. Voorhees eControl is a multidisciplinary team of professionals, lawyers, data analysts, investigators, technologists, channel management executives, and others that work with more brands and manufacturers than anybody in the world to help them to control online sales. And some of the symptoms of uncontrolled online sales being a bunch of unauthorized sellers, your chosen third-party seller can't win the buy box, you have significant MAP violations, channel conflict, those sorts of things. And that's what we help brands to deal with. Worked with about 500 plus manufacturers and brands on those issues domestically and internationally.
Excellent. Nancy.
So I'm Nancy Eichler with Megafood. We're a 45-year-old premium supplement manufacturer located in New Hampshire. We're most known for our high quality products that are made with whole food. I've been with Megafood for 2.5 years now, and I've been in digital for about 25 years, most recently coming to Megafood from Brownie Brittle, which is a thin, crisp brownie edge snack, where I had been the first employee and grew the brand fairly quickly up to about 50 million in sales before joining Megafood. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. Took my Megafood iron pill this morning. Your brownie treat actually sounds a little bit more delectable, no offense. So I'll figure out how to get on the daily regimen of brownies. So anyway, all right, fantastic. Well, just for a little bit of context before we kick things off, this is primarily going to be an open Q&A across the panelists here. For any of our attendees, feel free to use the Q&A tab as well. This is an educational session, and I will be monitoring those questions as they come through or through the chat interface as well, and try to get to those and put them in as appropriate. As a little bit of context, for any of those that have joined the webinar, we will be sending out a recording as well following this if you registered or attended the webinar. So just wanted to make sure, feel free to take screenshots throughout though, if there's something that tickles your fancy here. At the end of 2020, about a little more than half of all of Amazon's sales came from third-party sellers. And if you look over time, that number has just continued to climb. I would expect that to be in the 60s or thereabouts. I know when Jeff Bezos testified to Congress last year, that number is a little bit higher. So the thing is, if you've ever sold directly to Amazon, navigating or you sold on Amazon or to Amazon, navigating the third-party seller strategy can be tricky. You either have to do it yourself, you have to find a third-party, marketplace retailer like Pattern. You have to put together a collection of third-party sellers through a third-party network. You may sell to a distributor that then sells 1P to Amazon. There are a number of different ways. They're obviously selling directly to Amazon. So we'll be covering a handful of these things in the webinar today, just a little bit of forward looking. First and foremost, the challenges and benefits of navigating third party on Amazon. Another, common misconceptions about selling or moving to a third party model or using a third party seller. Maintaining your control of the brand under this strategy and stopping unauthorized sellers from interfering with sales. Should you try to do it yourself? Should you use one of these models I alluded to earlier? Technology or software for navigating third party, and then looking at domestic and international growth across other marketplaces once you feel confident on the Amazon landscape. There are a number of different marketplaces out there that don't even have a 1P model, Alibaba being the most famous. They kind of pioneered this third-party strategy. So it is an important thing to consider. Even if you stay 1P on Amazon, there's still eBay that doesn't really have a 1P strategy. You have to go third party. So looking across domestic and international expansion is going to be another one. So maybe I'll start with you, Steve, in helping educate for those that aren't super familiar, not just the kind of models of 1P and 3P, but maybe the different strategies you could weigh in as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Alibaba, because in a lot of ways, I'm surprised that Amazon still maintains this heavy 1P Amazon retail strategy because of their focus and move to profitability. Carrying inventory and reselling inventory is a tough game, especially at the scale that they're doing it. But ultimately, this is really interesting. I get to work with a lot of great brands, across all categories: automotive, pet, baby, health and household. And they're all faced with the same challenge. Do I sell to Amazon retail, which they kind of make it easy, they kind of lure you in, and a lot of brands start in that place, or do I go to this 3P place that seems a little more a la carte, a little more customized, and maybe more difficult to figure out? And so a lot of times brands start kind of on the decision tree. Do I go 1P? Do I go 3P? The easier maybe entree is 1P. But they quickly find that based on some of their business practices, their pricing practices, how they distribute their product, that 1P is not a good fit for them. And then they have to try and course correct halfway in. But ultimately, both of these strategies, 1P or 3P, could work really well for your brand. I think fundamentally, if you're a brand that doesn't care what your product sold for, the price that it's sold for, then 1P might be a good strategy for you. But if you have pricing policies, if you want price points upheld, and you're starting to see a lot of channel conflict across a lot of your different channels, then 3P is the space that you're going to want to be in, because that's going to give you more control over price, over distribution, over ultimately your presence on Amazon.
Okay, love it. I think that's pretty thorough. Let's move on to the next question here. Why are so many sellers switching from 1P to 3P? Maybe Darren, you can kick this one off, and I'd love to get Nancy's thoughts as well on this one.
Yeah, sure. So, from our perspective, where we sit, I think at the most macro level, it's brands wanting to maintain a bit more control over their own destiny, as Steve suggested. When you're selling in a 1P model, you ship your product and you have very little control from that point forward. And brands often see manifestations of that lack of control through that channel conflict, through unauthorized sellers interfering with their 1P sales, through erosion of their brand value, brand image, negative reviews stacking up, you name it. And as this channel grows in size and importance, you see brands wanting to have a bit more control over their destiny, to be able to, as they're doing business with their offline customers, to say, hey, look, we're doing everything we can to maintain control of our brand, to incentivize really high quality partners to sell our products, to do the things necessary to promote us vis-a-vis marketing initiatives, trained sales teams, displays, all of those things in the brick and mortar world that really become a tough proposition when a brand is out of control online. So, I think that just as that general matter, to be able to really drive the business, to zero in, to have a true growth partner like a Pattern being in their corner is why we see brands flipping 1P to 3P in many instances.
Excellent. How about you, Nancy?
So I have I guess the benefit of having been at a company where we had worked both with 1P and also managed 3P direct, as well as having 3P marketplace resellers who were selling our product. And I think to Darren's point, brand control was continually an issue, could be an issue even across 3P. But what we found with the 1P environment, at least while I was at Brownie Brittle, was that we definitely pricing always was impacted. I felt like it was a fairly frequent issue that I would log on and see our product either drop down significantly or slightly up. It was kind of all over. And while we want to allow our retailers to set their pricing, we do have, as I came to Mega Food, we have a fairly strong IMAP policy, and so it was important to us to not go the 1P route because we were very concerned about that. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons for us to, at the moment, not want to pursue a 1P strategy. And then, there are also certain contract negotiations with Amazon that can be, once you go down that path and you're kind of tied in with them, then you're negotiating from that, whatever value contract you can get, you're constantly negotiating from that point. And we do have the benefit of our parent company having 1P, so we're able to see both sides. But for us right now, there are reasons that 1P might work for one company, but for us right now, it would only be a detriment to us.
Yeah, super helpful. And again, I'm sure there are a lot of people on the call, that are going to find a lot of value in everything that you just outlined on that front. One of the questions that came through that I think is relevant to this, so maybe Darren, I'll toss it back to you, is any strategies, tips, concerns for brands maintaining a 1P relationship but adding a 3P presence as well? I'm sure that kind of this hybrid model you come across a lot. What feedback do you have or gotchas to have people look for?
Yeah, so I think, I'll let the brands, decide for themselves whether the commercials of that are good and attractive and something that you want to pursue strategically. I think as you get down more into an execution framework, I think what you want to avoid is having, ASIN overlap between your 1P presence and your authorized third-party presence. I mean, you really don't want to set yourself up to be fighting, your own brand on the platform for sales and setting yourself up for that erosion. So I would suggest some form of segmentation under that type of strategy, unless of course it is just your 3P play is just an inventory play, essentially, should 1P run out of stock and you just want to be there, but not actively trying to sell through the storefront. I think just at a basic level, that's going to give you the best chance to maintain control of the brand and not erode yourself in the process.
Love it. Any comments from you on that one, Nancy, either? I'm sure that has crossed your mind before. Why not try to do hybrid? What are your thoughts and how did you end up with a decision there?
Yeah, well, for us, again, in our case, and I don't want to modify a topic, but it's also looking at what approach you have to 3P that can, vary that decision. But for us, from a 1P perspective, it is more resource demanding. I felt like, when I worked on the 1P side, I spent more time, proving to Amazon that we had shipped something than I did actually working on whether I could actually, selling the product and my marketing. But I think that, to the point mentioned earlier by Darren, when we look at the hybrid model. The benefit to a hybrid model is certainly the ability to, if you have inventory concerns, perhaps you don't think that Amazon ordered enough inventory, it allows you to put product in the 3P marketplace to help backfill. As well, also, if you have holiday items, that can be real benefit, because Amazon is looking at, past sales to determine what kinds of inventory that they might order on a new product or a seasonal product, and they're not going to be accurate. So the 3P allows you to help, with that inventory flow, control it a little bit more.
Awesome. Yeah, so many great points. Maybe I'll add from my end, one of those considerations of going 3P is just what is the impact? What is Amazon going to do? They often will threaten you. They'll often, kind of block you in a way of kind of switching over to 3P. One of the questions that came through the Q&A is Amazon singularity over, especially for distributor/manufacturers doing more than 10 million in sales with Amazon. I'm guessing that's an annual number. And I guess, singularity I've referred to as the combining of 1P and 3P kind of platforms. I've also heard singularity being referred to as Amazon kind of taking this stance and blocking distributors or brands from going 3P. And I've seen it on both ends. One, blocking them from starting their own third-party selling kind of strategy or store, and another one from working with third-party sellers, which they deem agents. It's called the Standards for Brand Selling on Amazon policy. So I actually have seen a lot less kind of, chatter, so to speak, on the boards, and seen less of it happening with brands. So I think that is a consideration. I have seen it happen with brands themselves trying to switch over, that Amazon kind of blocks them. I think it becomes an ASIN rationalization issue that Darren mentioned before, where if you're selling discrete ASINs or even product lines as your own 3P, there tends not to be as much of an issue. I've also seen Amazon not work unilaterally against companies like Pattern, where in the past maybe they've said you are not allowed, you are an agent of the brand, and they'll try to block it that way. Third-party networks have been extremely successful on that front. And then I will also say they'll sometimes block inbound shipments into Amazon as a way of kind of not retaliating, but just kind of forcing that issue. So I think, to Darren's point earlier, there's no silver bullet. There's no you should do this or shouldn't. It's very relevant to the commercials, as you mentioned, to the strategy overall, what you're trying to accomplish, etc. So anyway, some really good stuff. And again, I'll encourage anyone who's on the call that has a question for the panelist to ask it, and we'll keep going through. And hopefully my slides start to change this time. So one of the questions that we wanted to address that we heard, we tend to hear a lot from people, are just the challenges and benefits of navigating, 3P on Amazon. So maybe I'll come back to you, Steve. You mentioned you've worked with a lot of brands in the space, helped them probably transition to a third-party model. What are some of those challenges and benefits that you've seen firsthand?
Yeah, John, I mean, most of the brands that come to us, they come through a place of complete frustration with that Amazon 1P model. And they're seeing price erosion, they're seeing channel conflict, and they're just throwing their hands up like, Amazon's asking for a lower price. I've got 50 gray market sellers. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're getting product. And they're just, we need help. And so that third party marketplace, it takes time, it takes discipline, it takes rigor within the business. And there's a lot of cleanup that has to happen. And a lot of that has to happen at a very foundational level that the brand is not used to, because maybe they've been selling through two-tier distribution over time, and lots of retailers that were great brick and mortar customers now see an opportunity to sell the product on Amazon. And so that even though that third party side might look more attractive, if you're not going to go clean it up and try and identify who those third party sellers are and have some coordinated strategy, either a coordination of authorized sellers or moving to a single authorized seller, which perhaps is you as the brand, or it's an agency like Pattern, until you kind of get down to the root of your organization and say, how do we solve this? and recognize that the blast radius is beyond just Amazon. It's going to go, it goes to Walmart, it goes to your distributors, it goes to your sales compensation plans, your supply chain. And I mean, it's this big ball of yarn that you kind of have to spend some time and use, use like a Voorhees and others to kind of unwind that, unpack that, and figure out, okay, how do we regroup? Because you're a brand that has done really well in the brick and mortar space for 30, 50, 100 years. But Amazon in the last 5, 10 years has changed the game for you. And unless you adjust and start making some of those fundamental changes to how you go to market, then you're going to start seeing massive brand erosion and your market share erosion until you figure it out. And so, there's this exclusive model, which we believe is the best model for most brands that have kind of those pricing policies and price points that they want upheld. But you really have to ask those hard questions, like what are we trying to accomplish, and what are we willing to do across our entire organization to clean this up?
I think that's great. Nancy, how about from your end? What have you've lived this firsthand? Talk about some of the challenges maybe and benefits that you've seen on this model.
Yeah, I think, as Steve mentioned, you're often hit by Amazon changes, policy changes. And I think we've experienced several things over the course of a couple of years. One of them that happened, I would say about a year to 18 months ago, where Amazon, we have an IMAP policy, and so we had worked with Voorhees to institute an authorized reseller policy as well, which was terrific for us. And then all of a sudden, Amazon changed, one of their approaches and allowed. They were then dropping the prices of our authorized resellers automatically without the resellers having approved that. So where we thought the resellers might be in violation, even though they were technically authorized, we came to find out that Amazon was funding the discounts, which was great for unauthorized resellers. So unauthorized resellers had to run for a while that they were able to, the pricing drop was being funded by Amazon. So that threw us for a loop at the time until we got a good handle on it. And then most recently, which, working with Pattern, the VMS, Amazon has decided that VMS needs a certain level of certification. And arbitrarily, we had different products that started disappearing off of the network, and we didn't know why. And I will say in this case, as a 3P reseller, in our case, working with Pattern was able to help navigate that situation for us. But it's the unexpected from Amazon where, whether it's 1P or 3P, these things can be happening to you. But on 3P, having that partnership with Pattern allowed us to navigate some ugly scenarios.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much to dig into there. I think there are a couple of questions that came through as well that I think are relevant to this. So Darren, maybe I'll bounce it back to you, since there are some legal implications to this question as well. So this question is two-part. It's, when you're a third-party seller, how do you keep Amazon from sourcing your product elsewhere and competing with you by purchasing your product from other distributors? Amazon's mission is to buy everything and commoditize everything. Further, if you're 1P, converting to 3P is complicated, since you cannot withdraw IP based on Amazon's terms of service. So I don't know, hopefully you're able to see this one as well. It's a little chunky.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, in terms of, precluding anybody's ability to purchase product from, one of your distributors, I mean, that all comes down to your relationship with your distributor. I mean, there is no magic bullet to that. I mean, as a table stakes threshold, I think that you need to have provisions within your distribution agreements or policies that prohibit the resale to anybody except an authorized reseller. And you can define that largely as you wish in the US with certain, boundaries that are too much in the weeds for this type of discussion. But I mean, that's first and foremost. And secondly, to the extent that you are having this issue, you need to get down to what we would call the diversion source or the root cause of which distributors are supplying, and go through that exercise. I mean, there's no magic bullet in that respect, other than to have the appropriate language and then to do the work to figure out who it is that's sourcing and apply appropriate business discipline. Now, the pushback you would hear is, oh, I can't do this to this distributor or that distributor, or I can't change my practices. And I mean, if that's the position of the company, then you're going to have to live with the consequences. I think that for a long time, brands, and still today, I mean, very, very sophisticated companies think, Amazon or other marketplaces are going to come around and see it my way, or do things my way, or that's consistent with how I want to go to market. And I just don't think that that's true. I think that brands and manufacturers today need to evaluate how they will succeed and thrive and exist within the marketplace-driven world that we find ourselves in, because it has no respect for your current distribution setup. I mean, it just goes back to the whole "your margins, my opportunity" ethos. So, the only way out is through on that issue. You want me to touch briefly on the second one, John, or move on from here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The second question is, what are some best practices around maintaining exclusivity on marketplaces, i.e. reducing or eliminating unauthorized resellers? And so this question gets to, the core of what Vorys eControl does. Vorys eControl helps manufacturers and brands to enable the execution of their intended commercial strategy. And so if your intended commercial strategy is to have exclusivity, for example, through a pattern or through your own storefront, or even to Amazon 1P, if you only want one seller on the marketplaces, then our view would be that for most brands, the closer that you are to one, the better your performance will be. You need to do several things. Number one, you have to have your authorized sellers under appropriate control, meaning you have to have the necessary policies, agreements with each of your channel customers. So distributors, retailers, co-ops, buying groups, however you're selling, have each appropriate channel under the right policy that says, this is your lane, this is where you can sell my product in an authorized manner. So you have to define your channels. Secondly, you have to have an appropriate legal foundation to stop unauthorized sales. As a general matter, in the US and in most countries around the world, it's totally fine to buy and resell legitimate product. So we're not talking about counterfeits, but just buying and reselling your product out of distribution is totally legal, unless the brand takes very specific steps to ensure that that principle does not apply. And this is where you'll see brands having things like special quality control programs and differentiated warranties that apply to products purchased from their authorized sellers, and other what are called material differences that will allow you to have an actual legal claim that can be leveraged against unauthorized sellers to overcome that first sale doctrine that says it's otherwise okay, allow you to do enforcement and to support your exclusive seller. I would submit to you that going out with a 3P strategy without those necessary control foundations in place is a losing proposition, because your designated seller will become just lost in a sea of resellers that aren't invested in your brand, that are free riding, won't be able to get sales. You won't be able to begin to approximate your 1P sales, and the strategy may fail. And so in order to have the growth and all of the benefits on the 3P side, and ensure exclusivity, or your ability to protect exclusivity, you're going to have to put those foundational things in place. That's just the only way through it.
Yeah, pretty comprehensive. Maybe a different way at that angle, Darren, because you talked about, the fits and starts of different brands that, are going to have to kind of go through the pain of making some of these changes. Have you ever seen an industry or a dynamic in which what you've just outlined from an e-control strategy will not work or does not work? Are there any exceptions, or basically if someone wants to do it, there's a path forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having done this hundreds of times across just about every B2B, B2C vertical being traded, on a marketplace today, it really comes down to the will of the organization, because it's just all about asserting control over your channels and having an appropriate legal foundation to stop unauthorized sales. And so that applies to potato chips just like it does to high-end electronics. And that's just the way to do it. And I think that what brands will find if they really dig into the data and whatnot is that you can become, the growth at all costs mentality will really, hurt you today. And I think, the ability to have that controlled growth, that profitable growth is where many companies across a great many verticals will want to sit. And so, the path to get there for most companies has relatively similar components, albeit flexed to the unique needs of their organization. So I don't balk at any particular type of product coming to us and saying that they need help, to put it succinctly.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. And I've been shocked personally as I've been at Pattern the last 3 years to just see, I mean, to Steve's point earlier, right? People in pet, people in baby, people in electronics, people in apparel. I've just been shocked. And some of them are widely distributed. Some of them will go through direct channels. Some of them, are direct, go sell through doctors or, physicians or orthodontists or, whatever it looks like. So been pretty shocked at, to your point, the flexibility of the e-control model. And you guys have done a fabulous job with so many of those brands. Well, I want to keep going forward on a handful of these, common misconceptions. I think the good news is in the last several years, I think there's been we're talking to brands every day that are more educated than ever before. We used to say 3P and you'd get deer in the headlights. Now brands are coming to us much more educated. They know a lot more. They've done their homework. Sometimes they've, dipped their toe in the water. Maybe I'll just come to you real quick, Steve. And again, you've helped a lot of brands navigate this. What are some of the misconceptions you've seen around this 3P model?
Yeah, a lot of brands worry about losing their ASINs. Those ASINs have momentum and velocity. They've got rankings and reviews. So a lot of them wonder, like, do I lose that? And the answer is no. The ASIN remains the same. It's just instead of Amazon having an offering and rotating through the buy box, it's just your authorized seller or whatever strategy you're using that's going to be selling and rotating through the buy box. We also see a lot of brands think that it's going to be a lot easier and that it's going to solve their problems. That's not necessarily the case either. If you're moving that third party side, it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of discipline. But one big thing that does change is instead of Amazon sending you purchase orders, you can now dictate when you're sending product into the ecosystem, which is a huge shift for most brands, and really kind of thinking through that and how it helps you, if you run through promotional periods or, if you've been suffering through out of stock, being able to dictate that is a really big deal for brands. And that, that's one of the positive things that comes from moving there.
Yeah, I think about new product launches a lot of times too. Amazon will kind of give you the Heisman of like, no, let's just see how the sell-through is. And if you have, everything from celebrity endorsements to influencers to a big D2C push or whatever, it's gonna sell through, and then you end up out of stock. So a lot of brands will come to us to try to say, how can I make sure that I don't get turned away at the door, so to speak, and I have sufficient inventory to do what I know this new product launch is actually going to do. Nancy, how about from your end? What are some? Yeah, go ahead.
I might just add, and this is kind of back on the hybrid, model. Most brands, and this happened a few years ago, and Amazon went to that that focus on profitability, and brands started thinking, okay, we've got to figure this out because Amazon's now crapping out our product. They don't want us to, we're having a hard time launching new products through them. And they're not going to do anything with multi-packs or bundles or value-added services there. And so a lot of brands started to shift over to the marketplace side for those three areas. And it kind of works and it kind of doesn't, because, if Amazon can't make a profit on it, then it's going to be hard for a third-party seller. But one of the things you could look at is if you move to the third party side and you have maybe a single authorized seller, you can say, seller, I want you to carry my entire catalog. I have 100 SKUs and I want 100 sold. maybe some of those are going to lose money, but others, will make money. And you can kind of look at a more blended approach of that catalog on Amazon. And then with the ability to ship product in, now you're representing your entire catalog. Your footprint on Amazon is more comprehensive. You have that control over what that selling ecosystem looks like on Amazon, and that's a huge benefit for you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Nancy, how about you? You've kind of been through the trenches. Maybe there's misconceptions you're proving out every day, but what are some of the things you've learned in your journey?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things on the 3P side is this misconception that you aren't going to have access to certain data, that you may not have access to certain promotions. And I think that's one thing that we've definitely found. You may not have as much the same kind of data that you're used to getting on the 1P side, but you may have other data that you find more useful. And I would say things like promotions, lightning strike deals a couple of years ago, you couldn't access those through 3P. It was only 1P, and now you can. And the same with A+ content, where fairly recently you couldn't have A+ content, but now you can through 3P. So I think that there's a lot. Amazon keeps seeming to, maybe segregate initially, but then they kind of bring those items along. So I don't feel like on the 3P side that you have less access. I think the one thing, and in sitting down with them and talking to them at one point, I asked that question, what won't I have access to? And about the only thing most recently that they could have come up with was new product launches, where they do this advanced buy of product, bring it in, and they try to give it support to help sell that inventory through, and they guarantee that they will, they're not going to be returning this inventory. But you can mimic that. You can do some heavied up media buys. You can do some other things through the 3P channel that can allow you to launch a new product. So I didn't feel like that was enough to go the 1P route.
Yeah, awesome. Darren, a similar question came through the chat that I think you could probably answer. Is a MAP policy necessary to enforce a good 3P strategy, or can you get away without it?
Well, it's not necessary for the fundamental reason that your MAP policy does not apply with respect to unauthorized 3P sellers. So your ability to deal with unauthorized third-party sellers to promote or to maintain exclusivity with your chosen 3P seller and those sorts of things doesn't have anything to do with MAP. So in that respect, it really is sort of apples and oranges. Where MAP can be useful in a 3P model is where you have a dedicated and invested 3P partner that would love to follow MAP, and you have very strong retailers, omni players, just brick and mortar retailers and whatnot that also would love to follow MAP and understand that it's, really key to your ability to keep investing in top-notch products and to provide an excellent customer experience and all of those sorts of things. When you don't have one in that respect, it can make it very difficult for people to get a sense of where to advertise your products or your preference for where your product should be advertised. And when you have things out of whack online to offline or Amazon to other places, you can run into buy box suppression, or Amazon may step in and suppress buy box if pricing in that channel is out of line with things offline or on competing sites and those sorts of things. So in that regard, it's sort of a table setting or a level setting, I guess, of sort of all channels that can be useful. But as respects, just the support and paving the way for your exclusive seller and those sorts of things, MAP, is not a must-have, nice to have.
And how about international? Like how the MAP policies, when you try to go overseas, how do you kind of implement control?
Yeah, so I think this just brings up a broader point. And I was thinking about it as Nancy was talking about all the things that she's dealt with. And, we're talking about all the different unauthorized sellers and MAP violations and all of these sorts of things. And the key to this whole game from where I sit is your ability to have a platform available to you that gives you the broadest suite of data, tools, services that allows you to flex to whatever your needs are of the day, commercial, control, whatever it is. And you know, how are you going to do that with your current team or whatnot? And that's really the key, is having that ability to flex. And one of the key things is, from a control standpoint, is, you know, outside of Canada, you really can't do MAP in any other country in the world. It's flat out illegal in Europe, Australia, Japan, other places. And so, you know, there are different levers available to you in virtually every, you know, commercially developed jurisdiction in the world. And you just, you know, you need to understand how best to configure them to drive the commercial outcome that you want. So in Europe, for example, you know, you can't do MAP, but you can have selective distribution. You can define the types of resellers that you want to sell your products. You can say, you know, I want somebody like Pattern to sell my product in Europe, and those sorts of things. And obviously it's much more involved and complicated than that, but it's really comes down to understanding what levers are available to you and applying them appropriately, both on the growth side and on the control side. And so, but just don't do MAP in Europe and Australia. I'll leave you guys with that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, let's keep moving along. Looks like we have, you know, around 17 minutes left here, and a lot to get through. Some more questions that have come through the Q&A, and so let's get through here. So, you know, one of the big questions is, you know, how can I maintain control of my brand under this kind of, you know, strategy, basically, and stop unauthorized sellers with, you know, from interfering with the sales? Like,
yeah.
What are some recommendations on that front? Maybe I'll just stick with you for a second, Darren. On
Sure.
this one.
And you know, I've largely talked through this in response to other questions, so I don't want to belabor it and give everybody else time to talk. But you know, what you need is you need a solution-based approach to this. There's no magic policy or tool or software or scary letter or anything like that that's going to fix this for you. You know, Steve touched on it briefly as well, but you need to do a couple of things. Number one, you need to understand, okay, how am I going to market on the marketplace? Am I 1P? Am I 3P? That's really going to impact your KPIs. It has nothing really to do with the number of sellers that you have and things like that. The key is, what is your authorized seller driving in terms of volume and revenue in the channel? And is that going way up and the unauthorized volume going way down? To achieve that, you really only may need to deal with a small percentage of your resellers. And again, just to recap, you know, you need to think of the world in two buckets. You have your authorized sellers that may be selling there, and then you have unauthorized sellers. With your authorized sellers, if you have the right policies and whatnot, you can just simply stop shipping them. You can talk to them. You can get them back in their lanes. With respect to unauthorized sellers, you need that very particular foundation that we talked about, so that you can go out and you actually have a basis to remove them, because otherwise you don't. And I would caution anybody on the phone that's doing some, you know, trick on brand registry or something like that, and filing tickets saying things are counterfeit, or, you know, doing, you know, shenanigans like that, because A, it doesn't work, and B, it can get you into trouble. You just have to follow a very prescribed path to have the right foundation for your brand to be able to remove those sellers. And then from an enforcement standpoint, look, everybody's budgets and time and everything are limited. And so we do what we call precision enforcement. It's data driven. Say, look, okay, who's everybody that's selling this? Well, first we'd say, what are this brand's KPIs? Selling through Pattern. Okay, well, we need Pattern to own 95, 98, 99% of buy box. That's what the brand needs in order to have the model be successful. So now we want to see, well, who's actually interfering with sales? You may have 50 sellers, but only 5 of them may be interfering with sales. Where brands err is they want to go and send scary letters to, you know, 100 sellers, and nobody listens to them, and they don't move the needle. When we go and we find out which sellers are most disruptive, then we apply the right tactics against them based upon, you know, our historical experience and those sorts of things, all designed to drive the key outcomes, which is going to be your authorized seller's share of buy box. And, you know, we can get into things in other platforms and channels, but from an Amazon perspective, that's, you know, that just strategy. What are you trying to do? Foundation. How do you build the foundation to be able to do it? And then enforcing against anybody that disrupts your strategy at the end of the day. Is an overview of that.
And John, can I add something to that?
Please.
So one of the things that kind of before you get into a lot of what Darren's organization is so well known for, you need corporate buy-in. You need buy-in from your company that they think this is important to, control, maintain, because you can end up with cross-channel conflict where, somebody on another channel, whether it's the retail side or an HCP side of the organization, might have distributor relationships and they're doing great sales through those relationships, but it's causing problems for Amazon because many of these buyers are then landing on Amazon and reselling the product, and the distributor may not be so incented to if you have a MAP policy, enforce that MAP policy through these buyers that they're selling to. So really, I would say you got to make sure that the senior exec team is in alignment, that this is something that as an organization you want to do before you can really be effective.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Super good points there for sure. And that's one thing actually I'll put a plug in for you here probably, Darren, like I think getting buy-in from the organization is, to Nancy's point, so critical. And I think when you guys bring all those stakeholders into a room and do, kind of your one-day event or half-day event or whatever it is, to get people to look at the data, to see what the impact is, not just on e-commerce, obviously, but to your point earlier, that omni kind of impact in brick and mortar and other channels, and get everyone on board and kind of see the light, I think is a really important step in that process. So it's not so siloed. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm trying to decide which questions to kind of focus on, but maybe this one here, what's the best tech for navigating a 1P or 3P strategy? You mentioned this a little bit earlier, Darren. I don't know if you had any additional thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, from our perspective, where we sit, and we leave the growth and the algorithmic search and the AMS and all of that stuff to the growth experts at Pattern. Where we sit on the control side for brands, you need to understand, so your tech stack needs to accomplish several things. Number one, it needs to allow you to find people selling your product, particularly on marketplaces. Number two, you need to be able to segment those sellers into appropriate buckets. Are they authorized? Or are they unauthorized sellers? Three, you need to understand how disruptive are these sellers? Are they taking away 10% of my sales, or have they not sold anything in the past month? Because that's going to allow you to appropriately prioritize them. Then you need to overlay, we have a database of 1 million individual sellers, and we know how we've interacted with them. We know what they listen to, what they don't. So you need to understand seller attributes on top of that. And then that's going to really allow you to understand your precision, channel management or enforcement, whatever the case may be, tactic that's going to allow your 3P seller or whomever your seller is to drive growth for you in the channel. So Pattern has a phenomenal tool, TriGuard and Predict, that we've used historically, along with a number of other sources that we access and our own data science internally that does that. But I'll let you guys talk on the growth side.
Yeah, I mean, so honestly, it's a pretty big question. It could take a webinar unto itself. I mean, the best tech for navigating a 1P or a 3P strategy, we've talked a lot on the tech, on the control, which is absolute competency you have to have. Another competency that you have to have is really market insights. And there are a number of tools out there, software tools that help you understand your share in the market and how you're performing against your competitor, how fast is your category growing. So there are a lot of tools, both honestly off Amazon and on Amazon, that can help you do that. Another big one that Darren alluded to is just kind of the grow aspect. And I would, calculate things like advertising, algorithmic bidding, automated software. I would include SEO and what keywords you should be bidding on, what keywords, are the most plausible. There are a lot of tools out there that can help. We at Pattern have kind of built our own software stack to solve for almost all of those competencies. The last one, of course, being on the 3PL side. Whether you're your own third party or you're using another, all the different forecasting tools and the tax nexus and the POs, and it does all that sort of stuff. Literally the warehouse management software, the cross-docking software, that's another area that you may require, especially if you're trying to do it on your own. So, but again, at Pattern, we don't really sell those tools out to the market. That's not our model, but we allow all the brands that we partner with to take full liberty of those tools to be able to kind of help manage, or allow us honestly to manage their marketplace business. So, and I think that leads into this. I mean, one thing that we see oftentimes is that the e-commerce teams are great, but they're not really staffed. They're staffed to do their D2C really well generally, and they might be managing it with Magento or Shopify or Commerce Cloud or something like that. But they're not really staffed to then start to do Amazon really, really well internally, and then of course Walmart.com or Target.com or eBay, and then international. I mean, it just becomes a cluster pretty quickly because of this, lack of data, lack of really human capital resources to effectively do this. So that's where brands will normally turn to us. But Nancy, you mentioned because of your kind of parent company, et cetera, you've been able to see kind of both sides of the coin, and maybe at some point you guys even thought about doing this yourselves versus working with an accelerator like Pattern. What were some of the key things you thought about or considered as you were going down that path?
Yeah, I think, as we said in the beginning that, a lot of it has to do with your particular business model, where your organization is, how savvy you are, how much, whether it's risk or tolerance you have for resources that would be necessary. I think for us, it in large part came down to looking at the capabilities of the partner and really comparing them to our own internal capabilities, and what it would take to bring on those resources to match those kinds of capabilities, and did we have the tolerance for that? And I think at the end of the day, we kind of sat back, did our evaluations, looked at the parent company as well, and said, this is not something that we necessarily want to take on. And I will tell you that, I mean, as much as I know about, and this is me speaking from my own experience, as much as I know about Amazon, and I've been in the space 25 years, that Pattern teaches me something almost every day that I didn't know the day before. So even with our level of knowledge and comfort with the space, sometimes those really expert resources get you to a level that you didn't even know you could attain. So for us, it was the right decision. But I get margin is always a consideration for lots of people. But you have to look at as an organization for where you want to be and what level of risk you're willing to take.
Yeah, so great. And I'll actually echo back to you the same sort of thing. Like, we learn a lot from you and the team at MegaFood every day as well. And I think the difference for us is that we also have 80 other brands that are constantly feeding us information, not just about best practice or theoretical or software tools or any of that data science stuff, but literally what's happening on the Amazon side. There's a little bit of a curtain there sometimes, but because we have 90 some odd brands feeding us back what they're seeing on their end, and we're constantly running into tickets that aren't getting resolved, or subscribe and save issues, like whatever the number is, I think it's helping us to get more savvy and smarter and able to kind of share, obviously with a high degree of privacy, best practices across, so that all boats kind of rise with the tide.
Well, and I think the the issue that I spoke of earlier, where we as a VMS brand have gotten hit recently, having the power of an organization with more brands is working to our benefit. If we were trying to tackle this issue on our own, I'm not sure that we would have been quite as well equipped.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a great point. I'll just say too, the one thing that I do find a lot of brands coming back to me, which kind of makes sense in hindsight, I didn't necessarily expect it, is just that a lot of brands do feel like in a one-piece scenario, and maybe even when they're doing it on their own, like no one's in their corner. And Amazon least of all, it's like, we don't care if your brand wins, we care if the category wins, we care if VMS wins. And if it so happens to be one of your competitors steals your share, your problem, not ours. We're still growing the category. And we generally find that brands feel a lot more empowered and like we're, Pattern is in the ring with them and we're backing them up. We're very conscious, I guess, of the, of that brand's particular growth rate and not at the expense of something in the category. So I think it's another kind of element to this. Steve, you've, again, helped walk a number of brands through this decisions, and it doesn't always end in, like sometimes actually we agree with brands that it's better for them to do it 3P. Maybe you can shed some light on some of the considerations that you've seen brands wrestle with and how they think through whether to do it on their own or use an accelerator like Pattern.
Yeah, I mean, again, at its core, it's a financial consideration. Can I save the margin that I would pay Pattern or another third-party agency by doing it myself? And then you start to look at that. Okay, well, what does that mean? What, on my side of that equation, what are the things I need to consider? There's tools that you would need to leverage. There's talent. Do you live in a marketplace, or is your organization a marketplace that has that type of talent? And then using Voorhees or other services to help maintain that control. I mean, it's definitely possible. But then the question is, so you have it locked down. Well, now do you have access to the data that you need to really grow and now compete in your category against new competitors that are popping up, some of your traditional competitors? And let's say that you do figure Amazon out and you're growing at a really healthy pace. Well, then what about Walmart? What about Target? What about international marketplaces that aren't Amazon? The equation starts getting more complicated. And if you can find a single partner that can do the whole thing for you, and you can see you can find a way to make the economics work. For me, that's that's a more logical choice. But you really have to lay everything out and really understand, where your risk lies, where the costs lie, and kind of make a good strategic decision.
Yeah, no, very well said. Well, I know we're cruising to the end. There are a handful of open questions, so I'm just going to run through those really quickly to make sure they at least get addressed. Then certainly, if you have other questions, feel free to reach out, and you'll have the recording of this webinar too. If Amazon's blocking the launch of a new item under our current 1P setup because of our suggested retail recommendation, will the same occur under 3P? The answer is no. You own your own destiny on 3P. You can set your own pricing. You can set your own inventory thresholds. You can push in inventory. So it gives you a lot of unilateral control. Obviously, Amazon is hedging that you're going to try to lower your price. And so you obviously have the ability to do that. I would say the one thing to be careful of that a lot of brands, just back to the misconceptions, is they don't think about this control strategy, omni retail, and specifically omni e-tail. And so they might raise their prices on Amazon, but if it's lower anywhere else and Amazon's scraping, they will hit you with suppression. And suppression doesn't happen a lot in 1P because Amazon just lowers the price. And so if you are holding price on 3P and they're on Shields.com or Cabela's or Best Buy or Walmart or wherever else, CVS.com, you will likely end up with a suppressed buy box. And so you have to make sure that you really take care of that control strategy from an omni perspective. The other piece, we're currently 1P with about 5 million sales per year. We do drop ship, no brick and mortar, half our catalog's furniture. They're heavy and large. So 3P drop ship instead of leveraging Amazon shipping rate would be prohibitive. Any kind of experience switching, absolutely. I mean, we do a lot of heavy stuff all the time. There's seller fulfill prime, there's FBA on site. Some of these aren't, always available to people who are just getting started out. But the short answer is absolutely, there are ways to get this stuff around without having to pay through the nose on your own, DHL contracts or FedEx or whatever it is. And then another question really around the ASIN level quantity limits and restock limits in FBA. Yes, there are absolutely ways to circumvent this to make sure that you have enough supply, whether you're doing it as your own 3P or using a third-party network or using an exclusive seller like Pattern. The short answer, I think, in all of this is really you have a lot more control, you have a lot more flexibility in a 3P model, but there are certainly some gotchas to be aware of. So anyway, with that, I wanted to thank everyone. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. Darren, thank you for joining us. Steve, thank you for joining us. We're going to wrap it up here. And really appreciate everyone's time. And if you have any questions, my email is john@pattern.com, JOHN, if you have any additional questions. And we'll try to send out, if you have any other questions for one of the panelists, feel free to reach out to me and I'll get you in the right direction. Thank you so much for joining today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care.